Can I borrow a napkin? So I'm happy to give a retail update because I know Rick cannot get enough of my updates. I'll try not to blow my hands on camera. So some of you know some of this, some of you know all of this, but I'm happy to come back and talk periodically to the committee about what's going on. Our biggest headline is our big construction project is about to start. Our makeover. We've been using 568 as our test case.
Is it the deli?
No, across the street.
Oh, okay, because when I saw that window in there, I thought that was a test.
No, I'm going to talk about that as well.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. And I just forgot about that. Okay, so, no, all we were doing with 568 to completely transform the arcade experience with the wood ceiling and the different light fixtures and opening up the space and what you see we do with 568, we're almost there. One thing we decided to do from the card mock-up is to provide some lighting for the signage. And I think we came to that conclusion the last time I was here. It was dark when I left, and I looked across the street and the Shops on Main sign was, was not visible. So we decided to try and figure out how to design some lighting into it. So that look for how we're going to transform the corridor finally got our RIOC permit, and we bid it out, and we're starting like now, this week.
No, he's supposed to start scaffolding today. I don't know what he's...
Start scaffolding today. So he's with Arthur Elias celebrating Easter. So sometime this week we will start construction.
Are we going with the blue and gray? I thought we weren't going to do that because the colors didn't work.
The idea is that every retailer can do whatever they want, but that we're providing sort of a platform, which is to have the sort of a flat sign across that's lit, and then whatever they want to do within the rectangle, they can do it.
But is the flat sign going to be blue and gray?
The background is like a metallic color, but the color of the signage, if you want to see a margin store, it can be, hot pink.
Okay.
Actually, I think we may have, I take that back, I think we may have some suggested colors, but for the most part, Subway has their color, Margie's has their color, so we're going to be open to that. And we want it. We want it to be, each sort of feel unique. So that's construction. That's going to go on for quite some time as we get all of the buildings. And then we have sort of unique circumstances with each of the wire buildings. In Eastwood, where we're starting, we're actually doing some insulation in conjunction with the owners as we are doing major renovations to the ceiling. Signage. So signage is where we are lighting the signage on the arcade side. What we decided not to do was light the signage on River Cross and Island House because A, it's not an arcade, B, there's more street lights, C, it's very difficult to figure out how to do exterior conduits and get junction boxes and lighting to light the facade without having it be too obvious. And the River Cross Co-op board was not let the record reflect. I didn't say that. It's like any good co-op board. There are some challenges and opportunities, and so the less we have to negotiate, the better. So we decided not to light that signage, and
Steve will be happy.
I think it's going to be fine, Steve. I can't certify that.
What about Westview?
Westview, we want to treat like Eastwood and have lighting and have the arcade. And it's a different arcade, so we're running some different design challenges. One thing that's new also is there are about 5 or 6 locations throughout the whole main street where the retail storefront doesn't look at anything. It doesn't have any goods and services. It has, in the case of the dry cleaners, it's sort of like a dark film. And in our attempt to sort of activate Main Street, we came up with a program to fill in those sort of dead windows with some graphic. And you saw at M&D Deli, we have a giant blown up wine glass. And that's going to be one of 6. It's going to be blown up blueberries and blown up peppers, and it's sort of a food emphasis, sort of artistic photos. And we played around with different things. First, we thought it should be island photos, like views of the island and skyline. And then we thought it should be more retail. And we thought, oh, what if it's like Roosevelt Island fun facts, and it's like trivia questions, and then we thought, well, by the third time they walked by the trivia question about, you know, Grandpa from the Munsters, they'll be a little bored with it, so we just came up with the idea of some interesting photo, and we've seen this around town, which is, you know, have some interesting artistic image to fill in the retail. So for the most part, we got very positive feedback as the installers were putting it in. We got one complaint that it was wine, so we thought, oh well, I guess we should have started with the blueberries. But so that's the first of what's going to be 5 or 6 throughout the corridor. Trellis is working with us and RIOC and David Hirshhorn on their renovation. So Trellis has the good fortune of having 3 bosses to work with on their renovation, and we've gone back and forth with them a little bit, and we all want it to happen, but we want it to look great. It's obviously a very you know,
disgusting.
It's not what I was going to say. I was going to say, because it is so centered on the island, what the renovation is going to look like and what the facade is going to look like and how it's going to be redone is, you know, going to be important. So we want to get it right, and they want to get it right, and it involves David Hirshhorn's building and our lease and RIOC sublease. So there are a lot of Indian chiefs to keep happy, and it's going a little slower than anybody had hoped, but we're on and they're on, and they are very incentivized to get going with the renovation.
What are the biggest sticking points?
Well, for starters, they had envisioned a larger footprint and sort of expanding the atrium space. And when we looked at it, we said, well, that's interesting, but that just can't be done on the fly. That involves the RIOC board, it involves zoning analysis, you're expanding the footprint of, that's Island House. You know, there are all sorts of issues involved if you change the footprint, which is what they had initially planned to do. So I think they're going back to the drawing board to renovate within their existing footprint, which I think is plenty of space anyway. I don't think they had sort of thought through, and I don't think we initially, when we just sort of looked at it, realized what the implications were of changing the leased premises, you know, which is not done lightly. Conversely, Gristedes is done, and we're very happy that they.
I'm sorry, can we back to the Trellis again
Sure,
for a second?
sure.
So now that they're going back to the drawing board to just get another schematic, are there any other issues?
No, well, it's in their court, and it has been for a couple of weeks now. They have to design it, and you know, their path of least resistance is to design something within their footprint that is, you know, going to be a modernization renovation.
So we're probably talking a couple months. We're not talking.
Oh, we're not talking weeks, but hopefully we're not talking years. I mean, once we give them our approval, and we're not going to be the bottleneck here. Then it's just a question of their bidding it out and getting the work done, which will take, you know, a few months. And you know, it's a good rule of thumb to bet the over when you're looking at, you know, how long these you know, restaurant renovations take, or any renovation. I just peeked my head into 532, which is the new market. And it's coming along. It looks like they're maybe 2 weeks out, but you know, they had thought they were going to be open long before April 2nd. I just think the joy of construction and contractors and change orders and figuring things out.
But like in 2 weeks they're going to open, you think?
You know, the old joke, whether it's construction or demo or anything, is like it's in 2 weeks. You know, so they've been saying, you know, I think there's been a 2-week concept for this timeline for 2 months. So 2 more weeks.
So we don't know.
I mean, I peeked my head in. There were workers there, and they're current in their rent, and they're you know, making progress slowly. They actually had some products in their store, so you know, it's getting there. And it's the same tenant who's also.
That scares me when it's a produce store and they have the products in there already.
They don't have produce in there. They have bottled water. Don't be scared. They have bottled water. It's the same tenant who's going to be doing the wine store, and I think they're doing it sequentially. So I think when they finish the market, they're going to start working on the wine store. But they did get their liquor license, and nothing's.
The wine store will be on the
holding the market.
same space.
Yeah,
as,
same as the garage shop.
They have a license?
What's that?
Do they have a license?
They got a liquor license.
Oh,
That took a while. Everything takes a while.
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks?
About 2 weeks.
2 weeks for the SLA to acknowledge that they even received the application. Speaking of taking a long time, the New York Public Library lease is slowly moving forward. There's been a back and forth between the public library and RIOC over some of the window matters that, we've been negotiating a 2-page side letter for 3 months, and the lease is slowly happening. So my hope is that the public library lease gets signed shortly. And unfortunately, we took a step back on the second floor of 504, which probably is new news since my last time attending this meeting, which is that the child school withdrew from the second floor, so that's now available. Lastly, we have been...
Sorry, I keep jumping back, but on that second floor, are you open to subleasing, like
Yeah.
partitioning it?
Yeah. And then lastly, last time I was here I mentioned the kiosks. And so we dipped our toe in the kiosk world, and it turns out that there are a lot of kiosk conversations going on now citywide. And New York City just issued an RFP to pick a company to provide kiosks citywide. And there are a few vendors we've been looking at. And we think it behooves us to sort of see what happens at the city level, because if there's one vendor doing hundreds of kiosks in the rest of the city, it might make sense that that company would have the most presence, and that could be the company we want to pick for our sort of pilot, which would be to have a few kiosks on the Main Street corridor, and that if everybody loves them, then we would encourage RIOC to take a look at expanding it beyond.
What sort of kiosks?
Well, what we have in mind, the last meeting I mentioned this, but I'll say it again. What we talked about last time was when you get off the tram, when you get off the subway, you don't know where you are. You don't know.
No, what you're talking about.
So it's the equivalent of in the mall, the you are here, and it can start out from our standpoint as the retail sublessee as a you are here are all the stores. Not that it's so critically important to know where, the nail salon is when you're standing in front of Trellis, because it's not that long a retail corridor. But if you start with the idea of okay, here's the you are here retail stores, there's an opportunity for advertising, there's an opportunity for community engagement. You can press this button, get the red bus schedule. It could be a neat amenity for the retail corridor that then becomes a neat amenity for the island, because we all want visitors who are new to the island coming off the escalators or the tram to have a you are here, to know where the FDR Memorial is, where Cornell is going, where all the retail is, where Lighthouse Park is. To me, what would be fabulous is if RIOC invested in some like fabulous Welcome to Roosevelt Island signage that stands in front of the MTA event building, because you come out of the escalator and that's what you see. You don't really know where to go.
They're gonna put a brick wall up there. It'll look nice. Let's see what we can do on that.
What's that?
This big brick wall that's going up there that the MTA is putting up.
Yeah, so you
we'll
guys
see what
should
we
put
can
some
do.
like fabulous signage
Or artwork.
or artwork,
We can get some of that
saying
signage.
Welcome to Roosevelt. It should be like the Hollywood sign.
What are we thinking about? You said kiosk. The reason I got confused is that I was thinking about those concrete kiosks you have scattered up and down Main Street
Oh.
that people use for
Right.
signage and stuff like
So in my fantasy vision, we get rid of them, and all of those missing cats or the Heights players flyers become digitized and become part of these fancy new kiosks. And if you, instead of taking your flyer and your duct tape and taping it to the concrete, you hand it to Carlene Jean or somebody else, and it becomes scanned in, and it becomes part of the kiosk information. And I said at the last meeting that, however, I'm sure there are people who are ready to lie down in front of the concrete kiosks to save them and hold off the bulldozers, so I'm not holding my breath. And so we could have a situation where we have the kiosks and we also have the concrete kiosks, and then we all live in perfect love and harmony with over kiosks.
If anybody else wants to jump in here, I feel like I'm taking over. But,
It's the Margie David dialogue.
It is. I understand where you're coming from with the do what the city is doing, but we made a huge mistake with the bike share program doing that, because that's exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to do bike share long ago, not only delayed, we are so far at the end of the line that if we ever get a bike share program that'll hook up with theirs, it'll be amazing, because we spoke with the vendor, we can't possibly start with you until we make sure we have the city taken care of first, and I'm sure we'll be in line back of the city for the kiosks too, because that's what I'd do if I were the vendor. Say, nice, Roosevelt Island needs a couple of kiosks, but first I'm taking care of my big clients.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. The flip side is, like, the first one we looked at was great, but they're based in Chicago, and they don't have a presence in New York. So, you know, you want to be the squeaky wheel a little bit. So, actually, a incredible resource has been Jonathan Calkin. He's like a minor in kiosk research. So, you know, we've been leaning on him to help us figure it out.
Well, I mean, it's just a question of finding a local vendor. We could probably do that.
Well, there are a few vendors. There's already been some stuff installed, and I went to check that one out, and every time I pressed it, nothing happened, and, you know, pressing it. Yeah. So, you know, we want to do the right one.
Maybe we could find something with these parking meters. Maybe they've got somebody that can hook up.
Well, there are all sorts of bells and whistles. Like, you can do a kiosk that also becomes a Wi-Fi source.
Right.
So if we're going to have one near the Good Shepherd Chapel, that's a great place to have a Wi-Fi signal.
I have a feeling that we ought to work closer with you on this RIOC as a whole, so that we get something around the whole island and
sure. Yeah.
quicker than the city stuff.
Can I ask a few? In regard to trellis, is there any kind of timeline? I mean, I think that you've been incredibly patient, but we're like getting really crazed already with. Yeah. You know, we just keep on hearing different stories every week.
You know, we had put we have an obligation in the lease as to when they were supposed to start renovation, but then when we felt like in good faith they were working to come up with a renovation plan, and then when we sort of like chopped them off at the knees and said, this is not going to work because you're expanding the footprint and you'd have to go back to the drawing board. And we were a little slow in responding to that. We sort of took our foot off the pedal in terms of what we expected of them, because we had been sort of part of the slowness. So I know from his standpoint, I think his interests are aligned. He realizes that his business needs to improve, A, in order to succeed, B, in order to pay the higher rent, C, there's more competition on the island now, and that's not going to decrease as, you know, more stuff opens. So I think he's motivated. I don't feel like we have to light a fire under him the way that might be the case with other tenants.
If you see that time is going on and on and on, will you consider some kind of deadline?
Listen, I mean, Trellis being a great, fabulous, you know, operator, I think is really important to I think between Trellis right in the middle of the corridor and Gristedes, you know, at the end, I think you need both of them to be really successful to sort of activate the corridor. Because I was really impressed when I went to the Gristedes opening, and to the extent that everybody from Riverwalk to the south, Octagon to the north, you know, walks or takes the bus to Gristedes and then comes back, I think it helps the other stores. I think it helps, you know, so I think that actor is very important. I think that having a good restaurant, Kate told me that he doesn't think anybody from Riverwalk comes to Trellis, and he basically said the equivalent of like, and I don't blame them, but you know, they will come, you know, when it's renovated.
People come from Riverwalk, not a lot of them, but some of them do, especially people with kids on Saturday morning.
I was just quoting Kay. I don't have the data, so. I think he's motivated to do it, and you know, part of our balance is, to some extent, we're breaking some eggs in making this omelet, and you know, we've shaken things up and changed some things in a way that hasn't pleased everybody. And on the other hand, we've tried to be patient on a few things and not just sort of change everything at once. So we're definitely sort of taking that approach in general.
And two other things, the M&D Deli, the broken window, that's their responsibility too. So, and you know that's been broken for a very long time.
It's been about a month since the last storm when that happened.
That hasn't been on my radar, but I'm glad you told me, and we'll get on it because it's every tenant's responsibility.
And then there's just like, you know, yellow caution, you know, blocking it, but it's been a really long time.
Okay, that's good to hear.
And one more, I'm sorry, and then we are one, the, you know, the fact that closed-in items hang out in the arcade, is
Yeah, we tried to
that,
minimize that. Is there still that happening?
yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late.
So is that allowed?
I don't think so. I think that when we took over, we told them to not have it hang out in the arcade.
It seemed to have disappeared for a while.
Yeah,
Came
so I
back
know
again.
it came back again. So, you know, the more that everybody here is our eyes and ears. You know, we came in. We really want to try and maintain a high standard. And I mean, for some of the existing tenants, sort of moving them along slowly. And with retailers, it's constant vigilance. I just noticed as I walked down the street that Subway has more posters in their storefront than I think our signage guidelines indicate. And it's not the first time we've had the conversation. So, you know, retailers would, you know, we probably all would do the same thing if we were in their shoes, which is try and be as as signage and product, you know, centric as they can be. And now, you know, we have slightly different priorities. So, you know, the more, you know, Judy Birdie emails us at least once a week with various things that she's outraged by, and it's actually very helpful for us because to the extent we can.
Oh God, you don't know what you just did.
You don't even know.
Did I just unleash the power of?
No, I think I'm reasonable,
You
so.
are. You are.
Yeah.
And Susan is. And
Everyone's
just
reasonable.
hand out that email address.
Everybody's reasonable. We do have we have an email address. I forget what I think it's shopsonmain@hudsonink.com. And
Say it again.
Not D. Kramer, huh?
212.
Shops on Main.
shopsonmain@hudsonink.com. HUDSONINC.
Okay, one second. I'll let the tape reflect the fact that Kathy, Grimm, member of the committee, has joined us.
HUDSONINC.
Okay,
So Nina was next, and then back to Susan.
Thank you.
I'm next. About the kiosks. As a 30-year resident, I wouldn't mind seeing some adjustment to the kiosks, you know, to the concrete poles that are in the middle of. I think it's time for some modernization, but I think we should be very careful not to throw out the baby.
Starts with 3 people at a committee meeting.
Right, you know, but I think, you know, there is some room on the island for doing some things the old-fashioned way with paper.
Right.
So we should be very careful. But the one thing I did want to address is I think we have a really good opportunity. Last week, the visitor center at the tram had about 200 people a day on the day that it was open, on the days that they were open. And you are right. I mean, we could do RIOC and all of us could do a much better job of welcoming people as they come from the tram. And I think there's an opportunity maybe to try to field test or experiment with that, you know, with some signage or, you know, some test signage via RIOC, some ideas that you may have. And I think, you know, there are enough people coming through. Now that the weather is changing and now that FDR is going to be open, I think 6 days a week from 8 to 8, starting next week or the week after or something like that, the volume of people coming is going to
That's not
increase.
up to Judy, isn't it?
No.
No, when I look at
But
it
what
from
I'm
a-
saying is we have a visitor center and we have a tram that generate a tremendous amount of traffic, and it's a lost opportunity to, you know, to not start trying some stuff out sooner.
Right, and I mean, and for me as the master lessee, I want, you know, I think a lot of them, you know, take the tram over, you know, take the people around and get right back on. I want them to, you know, get an ice cream Main Street Sweets. I want them to get a beer Riverwalk Bar and Grill, and they don't even know because they can't see it from the tram.
Well, there's not even a sign, let's say, even an inexpensive sign that talks about what's on Main Street, what's further north.
Right.
And, you know, there's a lot of missed opportunities
Right.
there. So anything that can be done, I think, to do that. And I agree with what you say about the subway because, you know, when people do come out of the subway, if an island resident happens to be sitting on a bench waiting for the bus, we usually ask, are you lost? Are you new here? You know, where would you like to go? Get on the bus, go do this. So, you know, the sooner we could do something even experimental with the remaining kiosk that's there until it's taken down.
Well, no, I think that we'll put in our super fancy gizmo kiosks in the next 5 years at some point, and then we'll see if they're sufficient, and if they're sufficient, you know, when we want to go ahead and we don't need the other kiosks anymore, we could we could review that situation then.
And then
You know,
my-
there's signs, you know, like when you go into Central Park, there's like very nice billboard sign that says you are here,
yeah.
and then it has like a map where different things are, like Sheep's Meadow and
Well, that's
stuff
what,
like
that's
that.
what we talked, that's what we wanna
Yeah.
do. We wanna do
Okay.
like a pilot program, we wanna do a pilot kiosk, at, actually, right outside of the RIOC offices, cause that's where there's an electrical feed, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so we wanna do our pilot one right here on Main Street, in front of the RIOC
And
offices.
then another one.
And then another one like near
Roswell.
504.
But what about when you come out of the subway or come off the train?
Well, so I think if we do that, and Hudson Related pays for it, and that's sort of our retail corridor contribution to the world of kiosks, then the RIOC board can decide if it wants to replicate it, throughout the rest of the island.
Because I think it's possible to do something like that without it being electronic.
We were just trying to be a little fancy and
Okay.
snazzy for the new century, and the flip side is, RIOC can do it. You guys, the more pressing need is the signage at the tram and the subway, not the retail corridor.
And
You
maybe
guys-
some signage on the buses, because when we tell people to get on the bus, there's no map of the island affixed to the bus that once you pay your fare, that kind of shows, the Octagon is here, the lighthouse, well, when it reopens is there. There's, something that doesn't cost any money, that can go up pretty quickly and can fulfill, some of David's needs and some of the needs to help people find their way around on the island as we get
And
more
there could-
visitors,
and there could be some
not
advertising.
locals.
There could be advertising revenue, whether it's from the stores or from Verizon Wireless. And so the truth is, if RIOC wants to take the lead on it, that'd be great. And if not, we want to do it because nobody was doing it.
And then I had one other question. With
Not
all,
our matter.
well, it's sort of a general question. Are there other spaces that are available where you are actually having nibbles or people about to sign leases, including the one that we're all moving out of this week?
I mean, we have a bunch of nibbles, but we do have space. I mean, second floor 504 comes to mind.
Mm-hmm. And the space at 552, the bakery, is that a done deal yet, or
It's getting there. It's very close.
getting it? Okay,
Very close.
thank you.
And then Susan, and then I think we'll move. Yeah. Oh, one more?
Well, it depends on what Susan asks.
Okay, I'm concerned about the windows in front of Westview. I'm also on the task force, and it's going to be brought up as an agenda item next week that we do not want our windows removed. You know what I'm speaking of, the
Sure.
street windows.
Yep.
So is there a way could you give me a strategy to bring back to the task force on how I could fight you?
Go, Susan.
Use the old civil disobedience. So I think it would be a huge mistake because we're going to do it in Eastwood, and it's going to look amazing. And I think that it's going to hurt Westview if Westview still has those ugly, dirty, not so relevant
Westview's even darker than Eastwood.
partitions. The truth of the matter is that we need the approval of the building owner. And so to the extent that the building owner doesn't grant the approval, that would stop us in our tracks. And I think it would be a huge mistake. And what I would suggest to your band of advocates is, why don't you just wait and see how it looks on Eastwood? Because we're doing it, I mean, you can see how it looks at 568. And I approached the matter not exactly with an open mind because I thought it was the right thing to do, but I would wait to see how our mock went at 568, and when we did 568, we did take out the glass partitions. And I've never been particularly swayed by the argument that the diagonally slanting rain needs to be protected by intermittent window panels where there's space in between where there isn't window panels, and at some point you leave the arcade and then you're not protected at all. So I think that you have these retail spaces that are set back, so my feelings are sort of well known, and I would ask that if you're And I happen to think that, you know, people just sort of view change as scary, and it seems scary to not have these partitions. So I would, you know, maybe encourage you guys to have an open mind before you hold rallies in front of the Westview owners' residents to take a look at how it turns out in Eastwood.
It wasn't
But,
the
you
rain.
know, I think I hear what everybody's saying, and I have to tell you that I understand where you're coming from, and you know, you have a very particular point of view and interest, and those of us who live here and work here have another point of view. And the irony is that there's still a population on this island who really appreciates the fact that you can walk out of 510 Main Street and pretty much make your way to Gristides, and even a little further north if you go that way. In inclement weather, if you're an elderly person, a person with a disability, a person pushing a stroller or two and having a couple of kids tag along, or schlepping your shopping cart without getting wet, or without being buffeted by the winds. And, you know, I get it. I really get it, but it is very...
I get that, but you're still being covered. You're still covered over. You're just not covered on three sides, and to be covered over your head. And it's a very deep sidewalk, so you could walk, you know, closer to the building and be covered. So
It's not the wind.
don't
I
get it.
mean, it's not the rain or the coverage. Most of the people complain about the wind. It's not the rain or water.
Okay, and I would just say it's not a continuous experience. There's some windows, and then there's some not windows. So people have been able to survive the spaces where there wasn't windows.
Yeah, you run.
Well, think
I know
about
from experience.
think about how much better shape everybody's going to be in.
So Marge, you last time?
Just two locations I'm concerned about. One, the hardware store, what's up with that, and the thrift shop, which looks nice.
Well, no, that might be for a session later when we get into some details.
The hardware store?
Oh.
Executive session?
Yeah, yeah.
And the thrift shop?
And the thrift shop?
Secrets?
I mean, there's, you know, I don't like talking publicly about individual transactions. I don't think that's appropriate. I think it is public that we're in eviction proceedings with the hardware store, and I can just say that, you know, the legal process is, you know, mind-bogglingly slow.
Okay, that's all I want to know, is there anything that changed?
And the thrift store, there's no news one way or the other.
But are they gonna clean it up, or are they gonna,
We've had some preliminary talks with them. We haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the thrift store.
okay,
To be
they have
honest.
a nice new priest here who I think would be.
Right, I know there's a new
Right.
priest, so we
Yeah, we
haven't.
can get
And
something
how
on.
new is he?
He's only been here maybe a month and a half, he
Right.
doesn't even live here yet. He's
Yeah,
still
so I had
trying to
heard
get
that. So we haven't really. We had talks with his predecessor for that, but that's it.
I think it'll be a whole different ballgame.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you, David. And
Sure.
We're going to just move on to some new items that came into our purview yesterday, more than anything else. Where we had our operations meeting, some things got punted